Welcome to Surviving Society. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Surviving Society. This is the episode roundup of Ez Chigbo's series, The Role of Love in Social Justice Work, Season 2. Ez, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me again.
I remember you coming to me and saying, I'm ready to do Season 2. And I remember thinking, oh, that's so exciting, but I wonder what it's going to be like. I wonder what the sort of focus is going to be. And I feel like listening to these episodes, it's very different to the first season, but it almost feels like a very kind of like natural evolution into talking about things with people that you've worked with in a very kind of authentic, honest, real way. I don't know. I think lots of people would have felt that come across in the episodes.
Yeah, I hope so. Since season 1, it's come up a lot in my work, just the conversation around love and social justice. Definitely felt more work focused this season, but in a way that like feels practical. So it's like actually this is practically what's going on, or the different ways that me and people that I'm in community with are trying to figure out the complex nature of love and the work that we do.
Yeah, definitely, because you've got a combination of kind of the coaching element, you've got the institutional, like working with institutional element, you've got the youth work element. And what really came through to me as well was amongst all those different kind of pockets of people that you've worked with and different organisations and institutions is that like there's obviously so much madness going on in the world right now, but there is the pockets of hope can be found in this kind of work. And that's what really came through to me as well. Like it can be so easy to kind of sit in despair around where funding isn't going or what's not happening or how we're being failed by different places. But to hear you speak about actual work that is happening with people that you have built trust and community with in and amongst so much anguish, I don't know, it felt very like a very hopeful series.
I like that word, hope. I don't know if that was the intention, but I'm glad that that's what you got from it. And I think people are tired, actually. So I think it's easier to have this conversation because I think people are so tired. So it's not as abstract. It feels really relevant and responsive to the times that we're in. And I think there are lots of like-minded people doing good work. So it's kind of being brave enough to raise the conversation and to like get into it and give language to what in many cases is happening quite naturally. I think that in many cases people are centering care and collective care and thinking about how that applies to the systems that we're working within. But yeah, I think it's just about daring to say it and to name it and to also name it as love and name the complexity of that as it comes through.
Yeah, definitely. I think all the conversations have got their own kind of unique take on love and the work and being in organisations and organising, etc. But I think one of the episodes which really stood out for me was the one with Catherine, where you talk about like how your relationship like grew by working together and how there was those kind of tensions and you both had to be kind of honest and vulnerable with each other, but make a space to do that with each other in order to go forward in your relationship. And I thought like listening to you guys talk about like how you felt toward, well, how you were perceiving Catherine and then how that evolved and changed because she allowed the space for you to feel that with her, I thought was really, really powerful.
Yeah, no, Catherine's a G.
Yeah.
She's a G, first of all. So I think there is like, and I think Catherine's a really good example. So Catherine's someone that started as a colleague a long time ago, I want to say about a decade ago, if not nearing a decade, and evolved into a friend and somebody that I really lean on and trust, and also that supports and coaches me in many different ways. So, but that came from, as we've outlined in the episode, it came from the openness to be with me. So if actually I see this and she saw something else slightly, and it's like, actually, can we be with that? Can we name it? How are you going to respond to that? And it's one of those one of the relationships in my life that really remind me that love is work, and not because it's hard work. So I don't find my relationship with Catherine hard work at all. But I do recognize that it wasn't necessarily the most obvious pairing, in lots of different ways. But I feel that actually, because we have chosen to commit to the work of being in relationship, and I think there's also something about recognizing that to do this work with people truly, really, particularly work around identity, race, etc., I think you have to know them. Like, I can't work with you if I don't know you. And that, like, again, with boundaries, like different people, this isn't me saying that everyone has to be your pal, or that you have to like be besties with everyone. That isn't necessary. But I do think there's a level to which you have to be willing and daring to bring your full self, and to allow and encourage others to do the same.
It did come through as well how different you both are, but like, again, how you make it work, and it's worked, and you created a beautiful professional, personal relationship. Yeah. The other conversation that stuck with me as well, all of them did, but in particular was obviously your conversation with Earth. And the thing that kind of played on my mind, and I don't know if you can speak to this more broadly as on this, is because you were talking about how being in community and doing youth work, and how so much goes on behind the scenes that people don't see, in and amongst so much disarray and quote unquote crisis amongst youth as well. But at the same time, there's so much going on behind the scenes, and it's like you guys talking about how you don't see that as work because it's part of who you are. But at the same time, like, it's like this tension between not validation, but like acknowledgement. That's what I mean. Acknowledgement that people are trying to do stuff, to make shifts, to make changes. And I feel like that's kind of something which I feel like we would see consistently across kind of particularly Black diasporic groups that have been organising in community for long periods of time. Like, you don't, so much of I had a quote the other day from a student said, "Does the revolution need an administrator?" And like, it does. Basically. And that's what it made me think about when you were talking. It's like, there's so many things that happen behind the scenes that you just don't get to hear about. We prioritise, or sometimes the sceptical of society is that we look at the bad things, or the bad things given more notice.
Yeah, Earth, again, another G, and ironically, well, not ironically, but I met Earth and Catherine at the same institution. So, which again, I don't know how much, I'm not in the most positive place for that organisation, but that's another conversation. But I do think that it's telling, and I do think there's something about like that space allowed, or the people that were attracted to that space. There's something really powerful about that. And I think with Jaden, he's someone that like lives and breathes, and like just the level of integrity that he brings to his work is really inspiring, really challenging, because like I'll meet up with Earth for food, and like he's talking about the revolution, he's talking about like the different processes and the different things and I'm not as I don't care as much, to put it plainly. Not that I don't care, but I don't know many people that can embody in all aspects of their lives the level of integrity that he does, and that desire for change, and to do that in a way that is loving and authentic, and bring himself to that. And when I think about what happens behind the scenes in youth work and some of the structures, actually, it's that work that upholds the work. So majority, if not all, of the youth work I've done in my time, and I don't really do much work with young people anymore, which isn't great, which I don't enjoy. I would love to get more plugged in, but one of the reasons why I don't do so much work is because what's being funded is crap, to put it really plainly. It just isn't so you go to work and you try and make it work, but actually what's often happening, particularly for people from working class communities, people that are living alongside young people that are experiencing challenges, the work happens outside of work, and that's the work that allows and supports people to even be able to, young people to be able to access the services that are being funded. And yeah, I think it's partly it's recognition, and partly from like a, yeah, people deserve to be recognised, but I think most importantly from a, if people recognise this, then they would fund it. Obviously Earth and I and some others are working on something at the moment where we're kind of doing some imagining and thinking about what could it look like to design an intervention, or to think about what it could be if young people were at the centre of programmes that were funded for them.
The conversation that came through to this theme came through to me in the conversation you had with Alex and Samara is about finding your people, and like how even if you're working in organisations or institutions and you seemingly have not seemingly, just because you work in an organisation that is claiming to make lives more livable or wants to make a difference, it doesn't mean you all have the same values. And I think what's come through in both season 1 and season 2 of the role of love and social justice work is how important it is to find your people within the organising or within the institution or the organisation, and the willingness to look at oneself in the work is kind of what came through in your conversation with Alex, and how being in community or doing that work with people that you trust helps you to do that and feel that you can do that in a safe and authentic way.
Yeah, I think so. I used to think I was really weird because, well, I still think I'm a little bit weird, but not for this reason. But I used to think I can't work with people that in this type of work, right? Because we're doing work that requires like hearts and minds and people and people's lives, right? And I used to just think, why can't I work with people that I don't know? Like, and when I say no, not that I know your name, I know where you went to university, if you went to university, I know, but that actually like there's an entry point where we've connected on something, and it can be like small or big, and it doesn't mean that we have to have things in common. It just needs to be that I can place you, I can place you. And I used to think I was really weird for that, and I think over time, the more I've kind of attracted my tribe and found my tribe and done the work to cultivate my tribe, and that's across like I would say not even just in the UK, like I think there's people that I've connected with, and like Ifashina that was in the first series as an example, that I've just thought, oh no, you're someone that you get this, you operate from that value system. And I don't think it's that rare, but I do think it's rare to talk about. And that's like, I think part of the reason why it feels important to do these series is because there's something about naming and giving language to something that actually a lot of people are craving. A lot of people are already operating from a space that centers love, or at least seeking to, but again, haven't necessarily named it as that. And that's where I think for me, a lot of the challenges come up, or a lot of the roadblocks come up, because it's like, I know that there's more. I know that actually to work with people, you need to know them. You need to, and there are like big conversations, which is a separate conversation about boundaries and public and private lives and all of that, which I think come within this conversation. So it's actually, how do you hold your boundaries? How do you honour your right to privacy, or to a private life, in the context of social justice work? So it's not me saying that it all needs to be like you need to bare your soul to every being that you work with. No, but I do think that we need to be able to see each other, and because I can't, particularly when I'm talking about the communities that I'm said to represent, I need to be able to see those people. I can't assume that we have the same experience, even if we've got overlapping experience or shared experience. Even when we use language like lived experience, what does that mean? We all have a lived experience of something, right? So what is that, and how does that manifest for you? What corners of your psyche does that hide in? So when that's popping out in particular ways or particular behaviours, how do I have the space to hold you with grace and with care, with love, to hold you accountable? How do I trust you enough to hold me accountable? And these are all things that I think come up, but they only come up when there's a level of intentionality. And I think you brought up the episode with Alex and Samara, and I think those are two examples again where people that have kind of, it could have been those, both could have been like sliding door relationships. It could have been like, oh, you're cool, bye. um, but I think Alex, definitely there's been like an intentional desire to maintain and deepen that relationship, and see where it goes and see what it offers in the context of this work. Samara, I think less so in that there's been less time, but I think I kind of, my initial encounter with her, I thought, oh no, you'd be great to talk about love and social justice and your work. So yeah, invited her on, even though there wasn't like a depth of relationship. But I think there's something in being able to recognize people that I feel hold similar values, and naming that and having conversations about, okay, what can we do with that?
If you think about where we started when you first came with the idea, I think back in, so that the end of 2022, beginning of 23, maybe midway through, midway through 2023, and we're now in 2025. How do you feel like your relationship and understanding of love and social justice work has kind of changed, evolved or not, over the 2 seasons?
I think that I am less afraid of talking about love publicly. I think that's one thing. So I think that like I'm less afraid of talking about it, and not just talking about it, but working it out publicly. I think that before I would kind of need to get close to someone, and like if you look at the first season, those are all people that, well, not all, but most of the people on that season were people that I'm like have quite a long-standing close relationship with, and these are conversations that we were having in private, and so that was my first time bringing these conversations more publicly. Whereas I think this season is slightly different in that, yes, like everyone on the season I love, but I think there is evidence of where of like actually these are professional relationships, and some of those professional relationships have become personal relationships, but they all started as professional relationships, and that has become more of a norm for me to think about, talk about, and kind of work out what the role of love in those work relationships are. I also think I've gone on a massive journey. The work with love for me is like always, it's always evolving, and so I've gone on a massive journey of renegotiating the role of love in my life, and how I embody love in different ways. And I think a lot of that has looked at self-love, I think. And so if you're saying those years 23 to 25 now, yeah, there's just been a lot that's happened, for me personally, that has made me think about love and think about how to show up lovingly, how to overcome fear. Because I think for me, there are two root emotions, which are love and fear. I didn't make that up. I don't know where I got that from, but somebody wiser than me said it. And I kind of live my life by that a little bit. So I'm like, oh, I'm operating from love or fear. And I think the more I'm talking about love, the more I'm seen to talk about love, the more I'm challenged to look at whether I'm operating from love or fear. And I've been surprised in my own personal journey, my own journey of self-love, how much historically I've operated from fear. So even like in the context of social justice, anger was a massive fuel for me, and still is, and like isn't a bad thing. I don't regret that. I'm not taking that back, but I do think that a lot of that was linked to fear. Was like, so a lot of my activism, for want of a better framing, but a lot of my work in social justice, social change spaces has been for fear of like things not changing. I'm too afraid, so I'm going to move. And that was a massive fuel, and it did get me so far. It got me to a point. But I think now I definitely operate more from a place of deep love and commitment to my community. And I think that's come from the work that I've been doing with myself on like self-love, and not wanting not wanting to live with that fear, not wanting to let that fear permeate, because I think in as much as it can be an amazing fuel for change, doesn't come without consequence. So that's a very long-winded answer, but I think I've definitely gone on a massive journey, and I'm still on that journey to think about love. So if in as much as these conversations have been about my public life, the work happens in my private life, that and like the two, where are the two matching up? It's what I'm saying on these episodes or in the spaces that I'm working, or if I'm on a panel, or if I'm like, if is that true? Is that do I honor that in the spaces where no one's looking, or where it's harder to do that?
100%. And thank you so much for sharing that, Ez, because I feel like on the show, particularly more recent years, like when we've kind of been interviewing activists, organisers, people that are deeply involved in different campaigns, one of the things that's come across is that people are really struggling with boundaries with their work and self-love and lived experience. Like, how do you separate yourself from the work? Can you separate yourself from the work? So I feel like definitely what came across, particularly in your second season, is that kind of grappling with that. Like, what does it mean to meaningfully engage whilst also like looking after yourself? And yeah, I think that more and more when we talk to people on this show, like the conversation's heading more towards that way now. If we're not here, if we're not well, health is wealth. If we're not wealth, we can't do anything.
Yeah, and people are tired, man. Like, that feels real to me. People are tired. So wherever people are, like in the context of looking at this particular topic, people are tired, so they're more receptive, has been my experience. And it's less of a like, why are you talking about boundaries? Why are you talking about self-love? Why are you talking about collective care? Because people are like, yeah, I need a bit of that. Like, actually, I'm so over the government. I'm so over the funding system. I'm so over the charity industrial complex. I'm so tired of this and pretending that this makes sense. It doesn't make sense. I think there seems to be a lot more consensus on the left, because I always say this, that like there's just no with the on this side of things. There's so much infighting. Everyone wants to be right. So much ego. There's just so much foolishness. That we're not actually good at organising around what the things that we are aligned on. But I think that people, regardless of what sex you're in or like fraction you're in, I think people are just tired. And people are getting reminded to move back to, okay, why are we doing this in the first place? And a lot of it is out of necessity. So, and I think that love is also a necessity, in order to, as a human being, like we all desire and require love.
One thing that I think is also worth sort of sharing on the show is that when it comes to both season 1 and as we enter season 2 of the role of love and social justice work, this work that you've done for Surviving Society has had so much engagement. Like, we've had so many people contact us about this series, about how much it's given them, how much they've got from hearing you speak with people about, the love in practice. And I think that's really interesting because obviously, like, we think the idea is great, we think the episodes are great, but it's kind of, when you brought this series into the Surviving Society world, it was kind of different to what we had done before. Like, you were talking about love and bringing that to the centre of activism and sociological thought and research. Like, actually, let's talk about love. And I think more people do want to do that, do want to have those conversations. And it's going to be interesting. We're now at the end of the series, so as we're recording this, we won't quite know how it's going to have been received, but I'm sure it's going to be very popular like the first season. But I think that really stood out to me, like how many people, even when I'd go to like events and stuff, like, oh, your like love series is so good, I'm like, Ez is amazing, isn't she? We do need more of it. We definitely need more of it, and I think there's a hunger for it as well.
I was quite touched by the reception to the first series because I just thought, I think I made assumptions about Surviving Society's audience and being more academic and people not being interested. So I was like, but it's important anyway to me. And do you guys think it's a decent
Yeah.
idea? So let's go with it. And so yeah, I was really touched by the reception. I got lots of people reach out and lots of people like just to comment and say yeah, they were really touched by the episodes. And I'm interested to see the reception to season two,
Yeah.
and more from a place of, are people able to engage? Because I
Yeah.
think it's challenging when you can, like, hearing the conversations and talking about it is one thing, but I recognize my privilege to be able to center this work in my practice, as a freelancer, as one example. I think lots of people are working with institutions that are really challenging, and so yeah, I'm hopeful, but I'm also like, I'd be interested in feedback regardless on, actually this isn't quite relevant to my context, or this is what loving my context of social justice looks like, and it doesn't necessarily align with, because I just want to name and acknowledge the privilege
Yeah.
to be able to speak about it in the ways that I have with the people that I have, and the ways that actually there is privilege, and lots of people working in social change spaces are in significantly more stringent and challenging environments. So this conversation, it might seem further away from where they're at. So yeah, I'm interested to hear any feedback basically on how people have received it.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I'm convinced it's going to be another popular one. The thing that I wanted to also ask you is in terms of like all the things, we won't go into the bad things. If we talk about the bad things, and the bad things become more present. Where is the hope in this kind of work now, in social justice work? Because as we know, like funding's going to places which we don't feel is the right places. We've got continued cost of living. Things are quite challenging right now in the UK and globally. But where would you say the hope is?
It's in community.
Yeah.
It's in community, and it's in intentional relationships. So like, there are enough people in my experience that are genuine, that are doing this or trying or striving. And I think for me, I'm not able to sustain what I'm doing without those collectives. And I think there's something about raising it up, but also about being in space with people outside of the work as well.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
there's so much emphasis on like activism, and this is going on, that is going on, we need to do that, we need to organise around that, and those things are true. But maybe because I've been in these spaces for a long time now, actually sometimes I just want to bust straight with my brethren. Like I just want to have a laugh, or I just want to, and like that, seeing the relationship between that and the sustainability of going back in to fight a fight, going back in to put out these fires, which isn't to me sustainable without joy, celebration, care, play. And it's figuring out how can I do both basically, and not deprioritizing one. So for me, I always used to deprioritize rest, because there's just no time. But I think another thing that I've got good at over the last year definitely is just rest. It's like, actually, I can't do that, or I can't take that on, or I can't be in that space, or I can't attend that event, or solidarity looks like something different, to what it may have looked like in the past. So I think the hope is in the work. The hope is in community, but doing the work to make sure that you can sustain that, and being accountable to your capacity as well. So being honest about that. Oh, this is what I can do. And I can't do beyond that, and that's all right. And I'll get back in, and it will be in ebbs and flows, and that's also all right.
Yeah, no, that's good. Community, rest, work, intentional relationships. Yeah, solid. Is there anything else that you want to say to sign off this series as?
No, just thanks to you guys again for having me. Yeah, it's a slightly different flavour to season one, I think. So hopefully people catch it and it resonates. But I want people, most importantly, to think about how does it apply to them in their context. So if there's anything to take away, it's like, cool, these are great conversations. Hopefully people receive it in that way. But what does it mean for you? And how can you start this conversation with one person or with a team or with an organisation? How can you continue this conversation in your own worlds and in your own context?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ez, and listeners. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Surviving Society.
To support our work, you can rate,
review and subscribe to host or produce a series of Surviving Society.
Get in touch with us via Twitter or Instagram.